Today I'm going to be talking about something that I feel is very, I don't know, it's probably the biggest win you can have in a school. It's the biggest win I can see when I have in a school, when we're working with schools, because we do CPD and we do training in the same way that we've always done it. And what I mean by that ultimately is we're in a situation where we are talking about people in a space at very, very high cost for very, very little benefit. So what I'm going to be talking about a lot today is where we are with our training, what we mean by benefit-led training, some ways to do that, and more than anything, look at the challenges and the questions that you may want to ask yourself. And now I say may because obviously it's completely up to you what you do with this information. I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of schools, and now we still work and consult with schools, but mainly we look at how we develop their online training to take care of their CPD problem and help them track and develop training. That's what we do as Guide. But previously, if you're interested, I was a former head teacher here in the UK. I was lucky enough to be part of a team that took a school to outstanding. And I guess it's the principles that we put into our technology that still lasts and lingers today. So hopefully that's going to be of use. But without further ado, I bring you to the first of our presentations. Thank you very much for coming. I am your host, Leon Hady. Now, we're going to be starting looking at benefit-led training, and straight away I'm going to bring your eyes this attention. Now, this is a summary from something at Warwick University, a piece of published research that they did, and say teachers express high levels of dissatisfaction with CPD events that did not meet their needs or failed to live up to expectations. The development needs of staff are most often identified in schools by the performance management process. Now, we're going to talk about this at several points, but I just want to highlight it there. If we are thinking about, just think about this, this is, we're talking about benefit, and there's a lot of things we talk about here about benefit and helping and putting the human first. A lot of the training I do isn't the system first or the government first. A lot of what I'm going to talk about is the human coming first. Now, if we do it within a performance management process, I just want you to think about what that means in terms of time, just from the off, before we get into anything. If we're only doing it, after the 3 appraisals that we do a year, performance management, how does it mean? How digestible is it? I also want to take you onto the idea of thinking about the management and just the idea of something being done to you rather than being something that you are interested in. And also just want you to think about it in terms of process. It's not something that we can just jump into and pick up. Now, this there's lots and lots of, unfortunately, summative research that says the difference is when we actually say that training, when it's like a master's or something like that, teachers are much more positive towards how it helped and what it developed towards CPD points. But when it's in-school training, it's generally not very positive. So I want you to keep that phrase in mind as we go through this. Now, if you haven't been on a webinar with me before, I'm going to maximize this delivery opportunity. I'm only going to talk for about half an hour and then I'm gone. And then you can pick up with me in a one-to-one chat if you want, but I'm always welcoming chats and items coming through. Hi, Susan. Hi, Joanna. Thank you. Hi, Lindsay. Hi, Anna. Hi, Eileen. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'll be coming in and out from this again from the chats, and we'll be stopping a couple of times to do it. Now, the reason that we've been quite useful, just to give some people reassurance, if you haven't joined us before, we've currently trained about 8,600 now teachers in some form of training, whether that be CPD day courses or whether it be QTS or whether it be leadership. We do lots and lots of different things, and we're one of the first schools to be selected to deliver the Super Teaching School programs. We're the first EdTech company supporting one of the schools in the north to do the training with 300 schools. We started it with a pilot with 20, it's gone very well, and we're already growing that one to now 700 schools. We work with 450 schools around the world already, so 700 will take us over 1,000. So hopefully you have an idea that we know a lot about training, and that's what I'm going to try and obviously prove to you or show you that we have some idea about training and hopefully benefit-led training as we go through this. Now, this is the last of our series of 7. You can catch up all with the others, but I want to talk about training and give a wider introduction to training. Now, training, obviously, having seen it in dozens of schools, the one thing that I would say is very, very useful in everything that people do is training is a must-do. Training is something that people have done to them, and they feel that ultimately it's something that they have to complete. They don't feel it's something that generally benefits them. They feel it's something that they have to complete. Now, you have to remember, if someone's gone on a master's and they're paying for a master's or paying for a PGC, well, because I'm paying for it, you have that automatic financial relationship where I've invested in something, and therefore I feel I will be getting out of it, because you don't want to think that you've wasted your money on your master's. You don't want to think that you've wasted your money on a PGC, etc. So generally, people's understanding and feeling towards it is much more positive when they're thinking about the training that they've paid for, because they want to get value out of it. But training in schools is generally, as you saw from the previous quote, linked to performance management, so it's something that they must do. Just ask yourself that as a culture, what kind of a culture that breeds and what it makes you think of. There's another thing about our training as well is we are exchanging the training for time. So just think about that for a moment. It's a case of, I am supposed to give you my time, which is, for teachers, there is very few more valuable commodities for a teacher than time. And what you think about it is like, we make this exchange where I'll give you an hour every week, or I'll give you an inset day, or I'll give you my twilight sessions, those pivotal kind of times. And I just realized it's really just kind of an investment into a lottery in, I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know what you're going to share. And I don't know how it's going to be relevant to me, because again, this is linked to things that are must do. Now, even just at this very, very early stage on what I'm going to talk about, just imagine that contrast if it was versus your goals. Imagine if I was exchanging my training, the training was actually in exchange for goals that I wanted to reach, rather than just thinking about it as my time. If I'm giving you my time towards goals that I want to get to, and you're giving me training relevant for that, well, how will I feel towards it? But if you're giving me training that's to do with goals that, or interests that aren't really relevant to me, how am I going to feel like when I'm exchanging my time? Because at its most basic element, that's what training is. It's an exchange of time, hopefully for some information and betterment. But when you think about it in schools, I don't think it comes across that way at all. We generally have an exchange for time, and then for kind of a politeness, or for something that's delivery only focused. We don't really know what we're doing with it. And the problem with the training isn't the days. Some of the days are fantastic, and they're pushed, and they're well researched, and they're energized. But because we have no system after it that's not benefit led, we don't know what we're doing with it. We focus so much on delivery-focused training rather than we focus on benefit-derived training. And what I'm going to talk about throughout is how we actually go back. Now, as you saw in the early quote, something that saddens me quite a lot, actually, a lot of what we do in our training as well is tied to appraisal. So basically, you'll do a given piece of training based on failing some kind of appraisal. And one of the pieces of research that I went into is like showing that 30% of appraisal of improvement is down to bad performance, or something to do with almost what I'd call it the stick side of the carrot and stick argument. We're trying to beat people with training. We're trying to we punish them in one way with the performance management, so we try and punish them with training. I have an idea there where it's all to do with coaching, but I just want you to see where training is in the modern world. And then the idea, if you do this, and it's something that I see more often, where you have voluntary versus compulsory. And generally when you have voluntary ones, you have it attended by certain people, certain times, certain cultures, certain cliques. And then where you have compulsory ones, obviously everyone goes, but you know what the attitude and the makeup is. So this is what we're going to not fight against. That's a bit dramatic. Maybe it's the language of the time, because obviously there's been going on with different demonstrations around the world. But obviously this is what I want to try and bring you away from. This is where we are. And this is what I want to bring you away from. And an item that I didn't notice, or I didn't make here, it's probably the most important item here. If I was to actually say to you, there, simple pound sign, if you take 3 training days, or 2 twilights, or whatever it is you do, and you think you have a 200 or 250 person staff, you know, in a typical secondary school, or even say 50 or 70 teaching staff in a typical primary school, that day is probably costing you, each day is probably costing you a teacher. I just want you to get that, think about that. Each day that you have everyone come together to have this delivery focused mechanism where they take the training, that is costing you a teacher each day, because that's going to be £25,000, £30,000 in wages and pensions of this that are all centered around this one day. So what I really want to talk about is disaggregating that and moving into a model that's much more benefit led. And I hope you're going to enjoy part of what I have to say. And obviously I'm going to be looking for your thoughts and feedback as we go throughout. Now, what should training be? Now, ideally here, obviously I could ask the question, because we're trying to be quite quick and concise. I feel, and where I've seen it benefit a lot in all the schools that we work with, it has to have the widest remit possible. Now, what happens sometimes is you might have NQ training here, you might have some senior leadership training here, then between them they're going to have some safeguarding, and then down here they're going to have some reactionary training. Over there's going to be some new initiative the school's doing. Someone's going to have to come back with a piece like that, and then somehow we try and maybe loosely connect all these dots, and then we bring them back, and then this is maybe done like 3 out of 10, this effectively 7 out of 10. This might be 1 out of 10. Really what we need to do is we need to start our training and think about it much more like a tube map, in a way that we start to think about branching, accelerating, diverging, and we need to make sure that people are clearer on the different areas where we're going. So our training capacity shouldn't just be, this is a one-off, this is a one-off, this is a one-off. We need to think about it as a series that's linked. And that's your responsibilities as leaders, when you choose to think about how you can piece the puzzle back. And here's the first part in benefit. All ends to this train station that I started to really badly sketch. Also looks like a stick man that was run over and is really not going to be able to find an operation that will heal him or her. this element here, we need to think about the benefits that come from it and try and think about how we can make it ongoing, and then also try and keep that remit wide. So if I'm doing my safeguarding down here, because it's all connected and linked and there's benefit, I see how the safeguarding ultimately forms maybe part or is part and parcel of my MP, Q, whatever it is, whatever level that I might be doing there, if I'm tying them in and setting them up right, because I can still cross-reference and have them in the same part. How many days have you gone to a training and you got a set of handouts, which maybe are in a file on a shelf that is forgotten, or they went into recycling and were never even looked at? People need to be able to access their training whenever they need to, not just have the sheet somewhere. And that's what I mean here by ongoing. Retraining yourself is just important in your training as having gone to the item in the first place, in the first delivery moment. Now, another part that training should be is thinking about developing multiple rewards. Now, the multiple rewards that we get from training should be, we should better ourselves. We should feel that we are better at the task in hand if we do this. We also want to feel that we know more. It might also be an opportunity where we get the chance to train. It might also be an opportunity where training has actually allowed us to get to a certain level. It might also be training has allowed us to come off probation, as we've seen with those different aspects. There has to be multiple rewards or feelings or items that are done in it, even if it's small as a competition, like the person who does X, Y, or Z based on this training gets a something, even if it's small in some way, shape, or form, because you have to make it something that people want to do. But most training is basically, as we said in the previous slide, must do, and that's one of the cultures that you want to change. Another item I want to think of when you think about your training in the first instance, and it's a first step towards benefit-led. If you look at a typical company, they will have a training manager for around every 40 or 50 staff. So you will have a training manager whose sole job it is to research, develop training for up to 40 or 50 staff. Now, they will be in charge of all different kinds of training. So I'll just kind of give you an idea there. Now, you think about that, that will be their full-time role. If you think about that in a school, if you have someone who is available to do those items in a school, you're thinking, okay, that person may be a full-time teacher, and then while they're a full-time teacher, they're in a place instead of where they have, very little time available to them, and then they are actually trying to train 200 staff possibly within a school. So if you think about what we're actually asking with the staff training, are we starting off on the best foot? Like, have we actually got the right ingredient? Would it be better for us to invest in having someone to have more time to really take a full focus on all of staff training? Or shall we do what we've always done in schools and try and say, well, we're a teacher with an add-on, and we're a teacher with an add-on, and we're a senior leader with an add-on? I really, really think it's important to think about this, because companies don't do it. Companies are always in a situation where they say, okay, as soon as you get past, really, they say it's 25, you need to be in charge of the training and the personalization of those things. They're not educators. This could be for a bank or a credit card company or for a Hertz rent-a-car. But what we end up doing is we're like, well, because we all understand teaching and we all understand learning, let's just keep piling it on each other. So we have to give more respect to the idea of training in the first place, time and the person in order to kind of wield the vehicle we want to bring about the most benefit, rather than just piling on top of a person. Now, that might seem very obvious a thing to do, and it might be like, well, we don't have it in our budget, we don't have it in our space, we don't have it in this. But I'm telling you, just think about what I said a moment ago. If you continue to do this, you are spending 2 or 3 teaching assistants, or maybe 2 teachers worth just in your 2 insets of bringing those people together. It will be much better to spread that, or to combine that into something that one person could coordinate and move a little better. Now, I'll bring you an example of a private school where this happens. They have a small teacher training team, and ultimately from what they developed in one school, they got to develop in several schools, and now they have a sellable product to other schools. I'm not saying that would be your goal, I'm just saying that's how important and transformative the focusing on training and having the right people and the right time to the people doing the training, rather than being an add-on and a bolt-on for different people. So do think about that. Now, the last thing as well I think about what training should be is training really takes the flow of school on board. So when we think about training that first day back, what's the first thing everyone really wants to do on the first day back for school? They want to catch up, they want to socialize, they want to introduce themselves. Now, we take that as a part and parcel, as a kind of given. We do our inset behind us just as it's going on, as it should be. But really, if you think about like tying everyone to a day or tying one in to afternoon, and let me give you this. If you think a member of staff's attitude in a twilight session at 4 o'clock, or sorry, an after school session at 4 o'clock, 4 till 5, and you think they're always not giving their best. Let's just take that example. I'm sure we can all think of someone. Could it be that you're always seeing the Wednesday afternoon 4 o'clock version of themselves? How would they respond to that training if they could access it at any other time when they felt like it? Well, how do we not know that during that time, they're always just craving to get back to their child? How do we know at that time they're always just craving to get something to eat after a full day? You are meeting, by having a set amount of time in that flow of the week, you are meeting the same person in the same mind frame each week. And then it becomes a nagging problem where they start to hate the thing because of the problems that preceded it. But if you gave them the training, exactly the same information in a way that they could digest and actually work within a time that suited them, you'll probably be in a much better position with them. Just think about it. I'm not saying it's 100% true, but I can think of scenarios where that's definitely the case. The disaggregation of training is where training should be. People should be able to access, like they access their music, like they access their Netflix, like they access their YouTube, everywhere else where we derive training from. No longer should we have training, I feel, to be benefit-led, focused in a way that's just, you will learn this time, this way, with these stalwarts or these totem poles of evidencing that I choose. I think it should be more flexible. I hope you agree, and I'll prove up my point a little further with some evidence later on. Now, here in the first part, we actually talk about being benefit-led. Now, being benefit-led really is starting from the end. So if I was going to start any training session, I'm just going to start here. If that was my time, and I say this is the length of the training or the amount of training that I have, what I want to start with is something over all here. Now, I'm not going to start and think, oh, yeah, great, the training started and it came and it grew and this and more training and meant this. I'm actually going to ask you to think about it the other way. I want to do this, and this is the outcome I'm going for. So therefore, the training actually has to work backwards. I need to think about the time going in this direction rather than actually expecting things to be moving towards me in the way that I originally planned or originally had, where it's coming up in that direction. Your training should be determined by outcomes. And if you go back to that tube map I dreamt earlier, it should be part of a wider plan. Now, in this, I'm also going to add that there should be research and reassessment in there. You don't want your training, if it's to be benefit-led, to all come out brilliant. Not every single one of us at any point in any of what we do is brilliant or is good at what we do. We learn, we make mistakes. It's just as important to learn what doesn't work as it is to learn what does work. So a key thing with this is to have very initial low stakes. When you're starting to put your benefit-led training in, and when you start thinking about the outcomes, you will hamstring yourself if you nail yourself to the cross of something that you don't know yet works. Okay, so what you need to do is have initial low stake opportunities to allow people to look at the different kind of benefits where you want to get to, and then we're going to come to it in the next slide or in the next section. I'm going to talk very briefly about the 2 questions I feel you can ask yourself that help you determine what your outcomes are. Because schools are generally in 2 situations, when you really pull it down. So we're going to work our way back from that. So I hope that makes sense, colleagues, looking at it from the start and then making sure that we're determined by the outcomes we want rather than by an idea sporadically here. Because you want the training to combine and build towards a common goal, or to always be able to tie it back into that net, that web, that common goal, rather than just having, like I drew earlier, just that sporadic kinds of training. And obviously I can't pay attention, but I know when I give this training in a room, I know that people can resonate and believe this. It just seems like we're just doing random stuff, and then suddenly we have to do this, and the new technology said that. Try and think of it cohesively. Now, the next part I think about being benefit-led as well is talking about things being leveled. How do I should be able to determine my level of engagement. So do I want to join in at a level maybe where I'm actually just clearly stating I am touching base with this to be informed? Or do I want to be someone who's in a situation where I'm actually doing deeper level items, maybe more advanced level items? Maybe I'm looking to lead a small research project, one that I'm interested in. But then lastly, maybe I'm looking actually to lead and develop something fully. My training should be leveled. If you say there's XYZ going on for new development with regards to a marking policy we want to put in school, okay, some people are going to take part. They're going to try the marking policy. Some people are going to try the initiatives around the marking policy, try it in different ways, different elements. And some people are going to be there where they actually have the position where they just look over it. Now, where I say this, remember, low stakes. We can't do this every single week. It has to be something over a period of time that you say a term. That's just our focus. Low stakes go into it, low stakes come out of it, and then it's easier. And what we have to decide very early on is what our evidence is. How are we going to judge this? And this is what I find most schools do very uniformly. Now, remember, if I go back to what I said about earlier, there's a training manager in companies, and they're in a situation where they're like, well, this is my job. I have to make this work and show how it's cost-benefit analysis to the company. Again, because of that, why would they do something? Because it's financially motivated. We don't think like that in schools. So really what we do with evidencing is we do a questionnaire and we say 42% of people said this, 31% of people said that. That is a very narrow way of evidencing something. And also it's we can't really do that with regards to teaching. You know, you have to see what happens in a classroom. And I would argue you have to see how your outcomes are coming about. And that's why for all that we say about observation, Ofsted inspections, and learning walks and the rest, they are the most proof is in the pudding version of items that we can look at. Actually, I'll take back the Ofsted one. That's not a proof is in the pudding one at all. But I will say the learning walks and observations are still our key way to do it. So we want to think about other ways of evidencing this. And this is the point I'll come back to again. I have to just clear this because my board's become quite messy. Apologies for that, colleagues. I'll say one of this. This is it. And I'll emphasize it again because it's something I never see in school training. We want things to fail. When we launch a new product in what we do now, and when I work with young entrepreneurs who are trying to do it, I say quickly fail or fail fast is probably the thing. You're probably most of it is test something to see if it works. And what you generally find is if you've got something that doesn't smooth into a teacher's day, then it becomes more difficult. So when I hear like, oh, we're going to do this big thing on starters and sections and chunking and blah, 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 and then I'll come along and I'll be like, that's all well and good. Just use a timer. Just use a timer. So you start a lesson activity, just put up 6 minutes. And then that becomes the rhythm. We see, okay, did doing the big item where we're really trying to look at all the different, or is it just, hey, try one thing for me? And that's, again, where you have the low stakes in the way that you actually change lesson planning or the transition in lessons through something like using a timer, or for something like relationships in school, we're bringing our ethos and value in, we're blah, 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 or it's just a handshake at the door. Just a handshake at the door. Just be at the door and say hi. I don't want you to do any more from that half term. Now, obviously, I can't tell you what it is for your school. I'm just giving you items that are low stake, and then straight away afterwards, you can see, has it been done? How much has been done? Did it work? Self-test to find out what fails. And that, again, is really, really important in being benefit-led, because you are just looking for the benefit quickly and testing it quickly rather than writing 49 documents that explain 17 different ways it could be done, and everyone gets confused and everyone's doing a different part of the same thing. So you're not cohesive in what you're doing. Start small and make sure that you're focusing on the benefit. Now, the next item that I talk about here is how to be benefit-led, right? And this is where I talked about the 2 statements, the 2 questions to ask yourself. Now, with any kind of training, especially if you're trying to change a culture around training, the first thing you can do is make it short and regular. Don't think of your training as one long 7-hour film or an inset day. Think of your training as 6 5-minute chunks. And imagine that you only, and I'll come to this afterwards, you only have 3 or 4 minutes to say something. Now, you might instantly think here that, well, hang on, if I'm only going to stand up for 4 or 5 minutes or say something, then obviously you're not talking about an inset day. And I genuinely am not. I think inset days and most training days are the most inefficient ways to spend the human resource possible. Personally, obviously, I think they're brilliant for everyone getting together, doing team days, team building exercises, getting together. But remember, here we're talking about creating that culture, making everyone feel good, getting everyone together. And on the other side, we're talking about I'm supposed to be delivering something that I want you to instigate. Now, you can mix the two, that's fine, obviously, but I always use the fun days, I say, the team days, to really actually get into the meat of what I want my team to go, and that's about ethos and values and vision, right? That never changes. You're not be like, and this week our ethos is, you don't do that. That should be really, really consistent. But where you have training days where you want to support people, where you want to build them, where you want to do different items with them, the key thing is just give them what they need. Give them what they need and then allow them the levels to go as deep as they want. One of the best things you can find with some of the stuff is when you kind of ignite a passion just through a conversation and then they go look at a whole world that they didn't know. That is your job, to keep the cookie crumbs coming, but also to see what they bake back for you and how you collate that. And I'll show you a way that we can do that afterwards. Now, the other element of this is making sure that you evidence it somehow and then refine. It's not enough to have a questionnaire and say 41% of people said this, that, and the other. What I would want to see is 20 videos of something being put in place, 14 different reflections, X amount of workbooks. I just want to capture the life of a school rather than seeing a stale item on a paper because that's the time we live in. We don't need to have word or the written word as our first form of communication. Now, I take this to an extreme. I deliver my team meetings in short 4 or 5 minute videos. I don't write emails anymore, even though I have a master's in English, and I love the written word, but it's just so much more effective and communicative. In the same way that you can see me now and I can capture this, imagine if I was trying to type this to you. How much of this could I get across if I was in the same thing? So I think about that more and more and more, how we evidence and put things, and then refining it. That's the first part. You have to have a vehicle where you can keep coming back to it. And this is where we realize the problem with WhatsApp and email is, as much as they allow us to communicate with people aren't there, which they do, quicker than mail, which they do, they suddenly become convoluted. How do I go back to what I was doing before, and this, that, and the other? And sadly, and this is how much I love Google, right? Before I say something bad about them, I'll say something good. When I was a head teacher, we couldn't afford the full syllabus package, etc., etc. But what I could afford was a graduate to work X amount of hours per week to make our own version of Sims through Google Sheets. Genuinely, we made a version that allowed us to do all we needed to do with Sims, and we just had the real base pack of Sims, the one that just recorded the attendance. That was it, because that was something we obviously had to send back to the government. But the rest of it, we built ourselves, and then we could make it do whatever we wanted to do. And I'll never forget that Google gave that to us for free. And when I say that, if Google asked me, one of the proudest things ever was when I got to go and speak to them in the States about, working with our company there. I was really proud of that, because it always meant if they'd have said, like, we want to 2 humans who say, like, we love Google, I'd have done that for free. That's how much I love Google, because of how much they help with education through YouTube, through this and the other. But one thing that the pandemic has shown me is I was like, yes, Google is in the perfect position to take care of this. It's going to be amazing. And then people started using Google Classroom en masse, and it wasn't that great. And it was like, oh, now we're seeing the limits, and we're seeing this, that, and the other. And one of the biggest elements there is where they kind of maybe rested on their laurels and they didn't refine. You have to keep refining and tweaking. And you saw the competition that came through from Zoom or Google Meets and Google Hangouts changed massively based on that. You have to keep refining what you're giving in your training. And this is where I'm going to argue later on that video-based training, or even like kind of audio segmented training, this allows for this to be really, really good. You're allowed to share and capture really, really quickly what we do. So I'm going to go back now to something I mentioned in the last slide, and I hope you can see that's a really annoying continuing trend that I do. Everything comes down to 2 items. It's not acceptable that. So something's happening in your school, something is happening is short of grades, something is something, and you turn that into a statement. And that then informs all your training. It's not acceptable that. So please feel free in the chat to add a couple of things before we move on to the second section, just while you're thinking about it. What is not acceptable in your school? What the training in your school have to lead towards? It is not acceptable that after a learning walk, half the teachers are seen as being X. It is not acceptable that the grades that we got last year were X. It is not acceptable that people come into school and they don't feel safe. You start from there, and all your training works backwards. Similarly, in the same way, to grow we must. And I think that's the more positive side of it, because I don't think at any point as a leader in school or as someone who wants to bring change about in their school that you'll rest on your laurels. So you want to be in a situation you think, to grow we must what? So to grow we must ensure that every single teacher is developed towards master's level knowledge, even if they're not completing the task. Could be something like that. To grow we must make sure that our highest ability students are being accepted in such and such a university and applying for X, Y, Z because they can, and they have this, and the other. And so you see, you just the positive and the negative. Now, I'm a very simple dude. I don't like things that are in long sentences or, just kind of like this. I can do them. I just don't like them. And if you can give me a kernel to get behind, like a rah-rah mantra, I'm in. I'm always in. And I like them very much. So for me, I said it is acceptable that in my school, that the staff feel afraid in class. And everything came back. That was the key thing. I was doing that in my school. It's not acceptable that, and we worked all the way from that. When we had the outstanding and this, that, and the other, to grow we must, and the phrase was, go beyond the school confines. And that's when genuinely we opened a shop. The school opened a shop in a shopping centre, and we opened a cafe in the local area. 100% true. We did both things. A real shop, students made stuff, we sold it in the school. So think about those 2 different kind of things when you're actually thinking about how to be benefit-led. And then the element that I tie upon that is you have areas where you want to make sure that your training is leveled, I mentioned earlier, evidenced and self-tested, as we touched upon just a short while ago. So I hope that gives you an idea of kind of changing, disaggregating our training, thinking about how we do this. In the second half, I'm going to touch upon more of those items, but more importantly, one of the things I think is really, really useful generally is we're going to show you just like some tools. Again, there are tools, but I'll show you how they're relevant, just in 30-second bursts, why they do it. Because what we learned from working with all these teachers and what we learned from doing all this is we didn't get it right first time. We're in a situation where we're like, okay, that tees them up, that tees them up, that tees them up, that pushes them forward, that pushes them forward. And it's just all those incremental nudges. If you're watching this and you remember Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth, you know, and he was talking about recycling and changing the world and changing the planet. And he was like, well, if we do a little bit of this, little bit of this, little bit of this, all of it combined ends up in a situation where we are saving and making a difference. And I would say exactly the same thing here. It's all the little things that we learn about how to do little bits with training, getting people involved, making sure it's from someone they trust, making sure that they can actually disaggregate it, make short chunks. It's all of them together that become very, very important. But I emphasize this just as I stop here again. These two sentences might be the most useful items for benefit-led training you ever think. Not in terms of, hey, what's been going on in the news recently? What's vogue? Who's popular? How much training budget do we have left? Doesn't really matter. All that really matters is those two phrases, and you work back from there. I hope that's made some sense so far. I've got a little more to come, but one of my favorite parts in this, and obviously to the colleagues watching, I really, really like hearing that, you know, anything was of use or being challenged on something or how we did something or put something in. So I normally need about 2-3 minutes here just to get an opportunity and a chance to hear from colleagues and see what you say. So please just note some key takeaways so far. What kind of key things from the session that I've said so far has been of importance to you or have been of interest to you. I will also be making this slide available so that you have this packet of slides as well available to you. I'm going to call this 7th webinar. Just hopefully some comments to me. I'll put 7th webinar. I will add that. Learning new technology every day, and I'll share that with you as an item that you can then go and present in or share with colleagues, etc., etc., etc. And I will obviously take full credit for all my spelling mistakes at the moment. Hi Blair, thanks for dropping in. There's a very nice silhouette of yourself there for a split second.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
My colleague Blair is always with me. He's been invaluable for the last how many years now, Blair?
Yeah, it's about 4 years.
4 years since we left this, but must be 6 years overall.
Yes, quite possibly. Yes.
I just realised no one's come in to actually sign up to listen to me and you reminisce, Blair. So I'm gonna come off. I'm gonna go back into it.
Yeah, no, there were a couple of really good questions in the chat, Leon.
Oh, brilliant. Fantastic. So can see and hear you being selfish. I appreciate part of the CLT would like to take some ideas for easy implement CPD. I'm not but I'm part of the CLT and would like to take some ideas for easy implement CPD. Okay, Susan, I hope we've touched upon some of those and I'll come back to them more. That's brilliant. One-to-one with Susan. Yep, more than happy to do that. Really great. There we go. Blair's. Thank you for mentioning that. I'm head of a small infant school. I'd love to revamp our staff meeting time. How do I personalise training to support staff personal goals, ensuring I cover the improvement for the school foci? Really interesting question, Michelle, because you'll never find that they're never untangled. They might seem like they're here and here, but they're actually a lot closer than you think, or you can make the link. So for example, I remember one of the things that was always really interesting with prevent, and obviously this is probably more interesting now, but when we used to do the prevent training in our school, one of the things that we used to try and do it was much more a film day with the staff. We would get the film together, we would watch films about race, we would watch films about transition, we'd watch short films and short clips just as a class, and as a staff, and we just kind of talk about them, and that made prevent so much more interesting after that. When you stand from prevent and you're just looking at it across on the side, you're like, hey, do all these various things that you didn't X, Y, Z. We started with watching videos about all different things to do with race, equality, the law, where people break the law, and just literally after watching all that, we were like, well, you know, prevent has some relevance to us now. But when I start with just the prevent training, you're just like, there you go, do that. Well, it's contextual and relevant, same as what we would do with our students in the same way. I hope that gives you some idea. So where you're thinking about personalizing the training, that's a more nuanced part in terms of, sorry, I've talked more about how you actually cover those things in supporting the staff in that one. Apologies for misanswering, I've misread that one. But the personalizing the training is much more to do with where you put it in the scheme of all the training that I have to do. Because remember, you can have, if you have a system or if you have a piece of software that allows you to run those 3 concurrent threads. So when people come into said system, like if it was Google Classroom, like if it was certain folders, well, they can access this, a bit of that, and a bit of this. Now, I'll give you this as an example with some of the, we once did a piece of training with someone with a religious group, and what we put was the religious, we made some videos that were to do with the religious section that they wanted, and we had English, math, science. And what we would see is, they would go into maths. Maths was the most watched thing out of everything with maths. And then they do a little bit of this religious school stuff, go into a little bit of science, and then back to maths. They never did any English. It shows you that if you have the 3 threads available in the same place, people dip between it like channels. So it's not just about like, how do I use my training days for that? It becomes much more important to make sure that you've got something that allows 3 different elements, or 2 or 3 different elements of training to work in the same time. Brilliant. Tanya, I've also had a one-to-one with Leon last week. Thank you for sharing experience. Oh, brilliant. Thanks, Tanya. I'm really glad it was useful. Another one, how do I ensure that everyone receives the message in the same way if they all access it whenever they want? Questions are addressed. So there's 2 things here, Michelle. Number 1, never is people going to understand things in the same way. And that's one of the key things we know that in class, I know that with adults. What did I say? What did I say? Because you can't help but put it through your filter. Now, that's why coming down to a core kernel, like I recommended and I'm actually mentioned, that allows you to get something behind that you repeat. Why do you think the slogans that we have and the slogans are the slogans that work? It's simply because we can take that much and then we'll dive off to it in all different ways. And I think, without meaning to be topical or go into anything, if you think of the phrase Black Lives Matters, that means 600 different things to 600 different people at times. And that's the point. You can repeat something, explain it, repeat something, explain it, repeat something, explain it ad nauseum. So it might be that when you're doing your training and you're in a situation where you want them to answer or you want them to see things in a way, is you have to show all the ways that it can be, but they'll never all take it to mean the same thing. And having that as a goal is slightly, I wouldn't say unrealistic, it's slightly, it's self-defeating. It's because people are different and people will execute it differently and people will see it differently. To give you a small example on this as well, Michelle, and I will move on, so sorry about this. To give you a small example as well, when we had the officer inspector come around, one of the officer inspectors come around our school, one of the things they said, and I remember, forget what was on the paper, and like, yeah, you're going to understand anyway. The part that I really remember is she said, it's every class I go into, it feels the same but different, and I can't put my finger on it. And I was just like, great, that's exactly what we're going for, because the message that people have got is how you make lessons engaging and varied, but then the way they put it in was completely different. And that partly is to do with lesson, but partly to do with teacher personality. So think about it in that way. I'll be able to look in that in more detail. So Susan, I hope that was useful in that way. Mark, how do we support NQT staff with our teachers from September? I need to be able to track what my staff are doing. Okay, Mark, I'll show you right at the very end. I'll just come to it. I'll show you there's a piece of software where you can do that, where you can develop it, where you can push people on there, making sure that your tracking is the most important thing. And I'll come to that after the second part. Brilliant. Katie, I really like that it's not acceptable to grow. Yeah, brilliant. I'm really, really glad. Thank you. To grow, we must. Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, that's really, really important for us as well. Really appreciate it, Michelle. That's great. The same, but yes, exactly, because everyone is different. Thank Jonathan. This is excellent. Really, really glad. It's just experience, Jonathan. Made a lot of mistakes, Jonathan. Made a lot of mistakes. So I'm in a position to tell you how not to make mistakes because of the amount I made. So with your permission, colleagues, thank you very much for being with us. I'm going to move on to the second section now, so you have an idea of what to do. Remember, because of the nature of what we're in, and because obviously you don't know me from Adam, I was just lucky enough to have a couple of schools where I did well by a success criteria that everyone liked, and that's what got me the attention. But my own success criteria, that was a part I was proud of. And I would take that in the same thing as well. Just whatever you're doing over here, and I suppose it ties into what Michelle mentioned earlier, is to do what the government or the school or the governors requires of you, but then there's your personal belief as a teacher and leader, is like how I want to do things and what I believe things should be. And I think that's really, really important. So the day we had a shop and the kids were really learning about business and having good manners now in terms of school was just kind of like, no, you have to sell to that customer. Yeah, and it's just kind of like, hi, how are you? And they just like, I didn't even know you could speak. But when the moment arrives, we're pushed into it. And that's what I think is really, really important. It's so much more about the ability to allow people, especially with training, to develop and then take it on their own. Like, you know, I've done an MPQH, but 99% of the stuff that I think is successful was never on my MPQH. but it doesn't matter. I did the NPQH and everyone's like a thumbs up. And then I went that way and did the things that I believe in, but I still had a link to the NPQH. Why? Because a leader is there to provide value to their school and to provide betterment for every member of staff and every student. So you can find the link. So apologies for the segue. Okay, so moving on to part 2. Another key thing about benefit-led training is the way in that, as I said before, we look at what the result is, and this is a key thing, how it's used. It is terrible to actually have some good results out of something and then not capitalize on it. So you have to think, how do you double down on this point? How do you use it? How do you share it? How do you extol it? How do you make sure of it? How do you repeat it? Think of how it's used. Now, a big thing that I've said in some of the other items as well, for me, I think this is best done in video. Now, audio obviously is a good quick response, but if you have someone in your school who's passionate, or if you have someone in your school who knows their stuff, why not capture them for 5 minutes? Especially in this post-COVID world, it is so easy to capture people in so many different ways, whether it's an emoji, whether it's a screen share, whether it's recording a PowerPoint, whether it's a webinar, whether it's this and the other, and just have, you know, lockdown hair and lockdown beard and be dressed casually. You know, I couldn't turn up anywhere like this in my life and then just share that video really, really quickly. And you see that so much more important. Facebook Live, YouTube, it's been part of our company's courage. Now, the other part there as well, we look on the other side for benefit-led training is show me the benefit. Don't tell me about your benefit, and without meaning to do the old writer's adage, show, don't tell. It's true. I would much rather see a 5-minute clip in your class where you've done X, Y, Z. Or I'd rather see how it's made you change your thinking, and I want you to capture that moment right there. We're like, oh my God, I get it now, and I did this, that, and the other. All those thank yous, you know, capturing thank yous, whatever the way is, whatever you're capturing, put it in a position where you've got the video share, the video capture, and that makes a chance for video improvement, where you're putting yourself in a situation where you're using video to raise the game. So you're using video to distill little bits. You're using video to do that. And I think actually it might be appropriate now just to take like literally no more than 30 seconds, just to show something that obviously we developed and do. The way we do our training is basically around that. We don't have long training. So imagine if you were going to go to a situation where you wanted to learn about mentoring and coaching, right? And so you go to a training day, you spend all day at an XYZ. The way that we do it is if you come to mentoring and coaching, you end up in a situation where everything's chunked. So I have an introduction, I have preparing for the role, which is 3 videos, establish a relationship, 3 videos, developing, and blah, blah, blah. So I can dip in and dip out. Now I'm just going to go to a video at random, planning and delivering your mentoring sessions. And I can see that's only 6 minutes. I go to another one and I can see from here, that's only 2 minutes. And I go to another one, I can see here, it's 5 minutes. Now, why is this important, colleagues? Again, you can be anything. I'm just showing you our system and what it does. But the most important thing to actually explain to you there is, what have we found people like and what they do? And in terms of actually using the elements and using some of the items that are there, on average, we have people who train effectively, answer all the questions, doing what's on there, etc., etc. We have them doing it for between, on average, depending on whether they're mobile or whether on this. If they're on a computer, it's slightly longer, but it is, and I'm back on pen, so we have it between 16 and 18 minutes. And people will do that daily. People seem to find that around the 20-minute mark. That's not going to surprise us, probably. We know that concentration generally comes in chunks of 20. If they're on their phone, they're on their journey for 16 minutes. If they're on a computer, they're there for 18 minutes. Now, think about that once a day, and they do it 3 or 4 times a week, once a day. Now, think about that in terms of the opposite. Back to the inset day, which I was kind of warning us against at the beginning. Here's 6 hours. We're just going to take it, and you're going to take it, and you're going to take it. And you have to remember a key thing with any learning that we want people to take anyway, adult or child, but the difference with adult and child, because the thing with a child, when we are teaching school, there's one real big thing that we have. It's just the stage of our brain. We haven't learned to reject as many things yet. When you're an adult, your brain naturally will actually start to reinforce the things that will benefit you and then stop the things that won't benefit you. So there's even the adult... Children are more porous when they're actually kind of absorbing things in that way, where adults aren't. So the worst thing you possibly do to an adult is sit in the room for 6 hours and talk to them. The worst. But we do it, and we don't have the follow-on. What about if I said you take the same amount of items and time, but then you chart it over a couple of days or a couple of weeks? And so this is another thing where we ended up actually trying to make sure that this was built into the way that we do our training, or we share our training. I'll just show you again. Like, let's say this time we're going to go to teaching with technology, and let's say I wanted people to do that topic, that topic, that topic, and that topic. Say that was my training. And what we see here, it's put in a learning schedule for the member of staff. So I'm going to call this, what are we with it? We're webinar 7. And I'll say it's the Thursday group. And we're going to start it today because it's Thursday. And I want you to cover all of that within, say, 30 days or a half term. But I know that you're only going to do, because of the stats, 16 to 80 minutes a day. So I'm going to give you to do, I'm going to ask you to do on Mondays and Wednesdays for the rest of that time. Mondays and Wednesdays, that's going to be your take it away, do it on your own training. And what do you see the system does? Here you'll see Monday and Wednesday, it chunks up the videos so that you're able to take and absorb those videos at that time. So again, it's getting down into manageable chunks. And again, that's a big thing about disaggregating your training, putting yourself in a situation where it's going to be seen at the time that the staff members doing it want to see it, disaggregating your training and putting it in that way. Now, when you're putting together the videos, you're noticing some of the videos that we do, and remember again, with thousands of teachers, hundreds of schools, some idea of what we're doing, always think I only have 5 minutes. I'm actually a little bit annoyed that I saw a 6-minute video there, because what we also find is when by the time you get to 8 minutes of video, everything's dropping off. When you're thinking about being benefit-led, remember, one of the key bits of respect that you can say to your audience, and obviously maybe I should have remembered this before I started talking today, the key thing that you should actually be looking at is turn around and say, I respect you, I respect your time, I'm only giving you what's gold. And that's why even in that little interplay I had with Blair there, where I was saying, maybe we shouldn't be wasting our time talking about that, even though it was the only one I did, I was just thinking, it's your time you're giving me, I owe you for that time, and I want to make it beneficial for you. So think about that when you're actually starting to do things. When you start to put it in and explain it that way, it's still very much benefit-led. Now, the other thing with being benefit-led is to think about how things are in 4 stages. Now, the 4 stages are key. Now, well, I say 4, you could really make them 11 if you so wanted, but the key element with actually doing this is this. Everyone currently focuses on content delivery. We put all this effort into making the nicest presentations. I don't, like you can see my presentation. I did not put any effort into this. Why? Because what I'm telling you is what's important. And then if we were working together in a training context, I would come to you again and again and again afterwards to actually look at how we're implementing this, and we're looking over it. But we focus so much on delivery. We've got the slides, we've got the presentations, they're well put in, and that's what we think of. We don't really think of the ongoing sense of community. So I would recommend you doing that in one way, shape or form. How do you do this in terms of community? So we've done the first item, whether you have small meeting focus groups, whether you have small Zoom groups about it, whether you use a piece of technology to chat about it, where you have a small WhatsApp group where you remind each other of it. And remember, WhatsApp is my second favorite tool after some of the own items that I have. If I was asking to look at WhatsApp now, in the essence, if you think about all the different little groups that you had, like the little working group for the holiday they went on, Dan's stag holiday that you went on, looking at Rebecca's birthday, and you have those little pockets of groups, remember to be using technology in that way to start building a small community around it. Obviously, you might then say, well, you know, when do we text people, work phones, etc., etc. You have to have a setup where people actually agree to do these things, and don't expect everyone to be on it. Just expect 3 or 4 people to be on it and the other people to be aware, because it's the same as saying, just that little reminder. You know, even if it's happening over there, but yeah, sugar, I was part of that group, I should have done something. But what we have is everything just comes to us generally through email, and it becomes a very much, you know, people complain about death by PowerPoint. I would much rather complain about death by email. You know, I've tried lots of different ways to manage my email. And the best way I think of managing it is, I'd be like, great, my email for an hour a day, an hour in the afternoon, an hour at night. I'll see you, I'm done. If you catch me within one of those times, great. If you don't, that's great. And I did that for a period as a head as well, and I found it made me more efficient, but that's neither here. Here or there at this point, what I'm talking about really is having a sense of community after the content, even if it's to review and to actually critique. Fantastic. Remember a Japanese method as well. When a teacher delivers a training, when it's in training, it's watched by up to 4 other teachers. But the problem is the benefit is those 4 other teachers aren't watching to say, hey, how good are you doing? Those 4 teachers were the ones who actually put the ideas that the teacher's trying to put into practice. So they're actually getting to critique themselves and hoping this person does well. Think about how that does. Again, it's a case of this person in that case is delivering that content. So the community afterwards they have with their Kaizen method is actually being able to watch and actually support and actually understand. And again, it's a different way of community. So you can have different versions like that. You also want to look at how people are implementing things. What are they putting into place? How are they doing it? Now, and this is, Michelle, it goes back to your point, don't think about everyone doing it the same way. If we want to make a safer school or a more inclusive school, and I stand at the door and shake everyone's hand, or you make a register where everyone says, yes, miss, or present in one of the different languages to be inclusive that way. Obviously, just as like pieces, because I'm a big believer that pieces make the ingredients. It's not this 16-page document will rule them all. If I do that and you do that, that's great. But it would be wonderful if I saw that from you in a video rather than you just saying, and we had this, that, and the other, because the page doesn't capture the excitement. It's very hard to make something exciting off a page. And that's why J.K. Rowling gets paid so much to do it, and James Patterson and other things that my kids have been reading. But that's what's important about it. It's not a case of just, hey, like, yeah, that's how it is and that's how it goes. The other part of that is sharing that item so you can actually see support, okay? And this is a key thing, actually. I'm going to touch upon one thing again, and this is the final time I'll refer to this piece of software, but I just want you to see how, I want to say easy, but how powerful it is, because this is the important part now. If you really want things to get better with training, the support, and which develops into coaching and mentoring, that is everything. If you are trying to be benefit-led with something, don't expect people to get it right first time. If they get it right first time, brilliant. Well, how can we teach someone? How can we do it differently? How can we apply it to a different context? How can we? But most of the time, you're actually going to find people did it a bit and they need encouragement. They need refining of that process. And we'll touch upon that in a second. But for the last time, I will turn to, again, just an item on the piece of software. So what we have here is we have a situation where I have logged in as the wrong person. So I'm going to go to a different one of my websites and we do this. This is one of the ones we do. We do a lot of sites for different people. This is one we did for the second biggest supply agency in the country. But the element that I want to take you to is this QTS folder. So we were doing a load of teaching qualifications for them. But point being here in the I'm actually going back in time now, trying to remember where I place things. Actually, sorry, it was here in Teaching Assistant. Now, imagine for a second, teaching observation was done more like this. Don't worry about all this for a second. This is the important part, this here. This is a recording of a teacher in a class doing what it is they do. And then you'll see here, there is this orange dot. And this orange dot, going back to the idea that I was saying about support and mentoring and coaching, is this could be anything, any of those items that you mentioned. This could be how someone implements growth mindset. This could be how they manage behavior. This could be them shaking the hands at the door. This could be absolutely anything. But for me to see it and get a real feel without me being in the class, here you'll see that orange dot, what the system allows us to do, and this is why we built it and it was effective, and again, it's one of the ways you disaggregate training and support the training, is he's talking, but at this point,
okay,
you see,
go to your seat and silently start your work.
Your interaction with Giovanni there is a really positive one.
Now, you're obviously not going to be 100% sure what you're watching because I've explained the context so badly, but I'm going to come back. What I've tried to show you very, very briefly and badly, because I couldn't log into the system that I wanted to because of my poor memory and not being able to see the password or log into the one that I wanted to, shows how well prepped I am. It's almost as bad as my presentations. What you saw there was the teacher has captured the implementation of a given thing. Like I said, that could have been anything. And then the mentor, observer, any stakeholder is able to support by providing an in-video feedback. Not afterwards, not 3 days after the session, but right there in the video. And ultimately that turns into something that allows you to coach and mentor and develop and support each other. And that is key. That refinement process is one of the key things where you actually get the benefit and the development and the value in the training. And then again, from there, you continue to refine and develop. And as I said earlier, you can then get to do the outcome reward. But this part here, I suppose, hold on, let me just get a different color because I'm so talented with this pen now. Let's say this part here, if I was to take it from there, support and there, that is where 70% of all the benefit in training comes from. This could be rubbish. The content delivering really can be rubbish. If you just say growth mindset to me and I'm there for 2 hours and I hear nothing else but growth mindset, and I'm like, okay, cool, now I better go and find out about growth mindset. The fact that you've made me aware of it may be enough. I may be then to develop it because it can be picked up by other people. But essentially, we assume that because you've had this, then you know. And that's really the antithesis of anything we would ever do in class. It's just that the way we teach our kids has implemented the way that we train our staff. You would never see this in business. In a proper business, obviously, forget David Brent and The Office and the rest of it. But if those who are in industry, you think you'd never be able to do that because the stakes are so much higher. They cannot afford to put everyone in a room at a cost of 40 or 50 grand a day. And they're not to be actually generally 3 times the benefit the amount that they spend on something. So if they put 50 grand into a day, they better be getting 150 grams value back out of it. Now, moving on, and I just put this massive reminder at the bottom, output is all that matters, and remember those items from earlier. Moving on, I'd say here where you start to iterate in the training. So you want to highlight, as we said, a need, and it might be a need to grow, or it might be a need to actually fix, but then you try and gain opinion and insight on whatever it is that you've done. And when I said earlier about low stakes, you think about great. Now we're going to trial low stakes, low scale, low stakes. Okay, we don't have to have everything go massively. We just want to fan the flames on a couple of things. Now, one of the things that you have to remember this, in all honesty, a lot of your teachers aren't going to do above the basics anyway, because you've given them 600 things to do and there's so much time pressure, etc. People will do things more when they believe in it and see benefit. So that's why having benefit-led training, saying we're all going this way because of this, we're all moving in that direction, this is what we want to do, this is your way of doing it, this is how it can be personalized, you can do it in your own time, it makes a difference. And then afterwards, when you find out what's got green shoots or what's starting to fall off a cliff, you refine. And then when you feel that things are actually relevant and done, you share. And that's another item that's so super quick to do via video. So whether you've got your own teaching YouTube channel, whether you've got your own Microsoft Teams group where you're sharing 30-second clips of best practice, whether you're using a system like our one, whatever happens, when you get something right, when it's gone through this, and then you think it's actually transferable, you want to share. Just take, this is a general thing where you apply it to everything. Like if I have an opinion on something and I feel I want to see it, I'm going to go and see, I want to see what someone says. So I'll pick a few people who I want to share it with. So I'll say Blair, and I'll pick Blair just because Blair's there. And I'm like, hey, Blair, I've written this article, this comment, and I just want to see what you think. And Blair's like, oh, that bit's good, that bit's good. I tweak that bit a bit, and et cetera, just, because that could be taken two ways. Thanks, Blair, great one. And then afterwards, I publish my article, I say my piece. And so you're in a situation there where you've gone through a very natural process, but think about doing the same thing in your training. People think so much about whether the training's there and there, but training should really just open the door. Training isn't all the answers. And I think that's actually probably one of the most important things I've said. Training isn't all the answers. Training is opening a door and then moving along. And I want you to think about, I hope you think about your training as more episodic in the way it is than trying to be something that's kind of complete and full and done in one day. Because that's actually a mindset that it doesn't align with growth. Do you know what I mean? I've done that training now. Well, no, you haven't done that training, because if you've done that training, then you have to be able to bring it out and do it at any single point. So if I turn around and said, driving a car, your learning of driving a car was episodic. If obviously you drive, it was episodic. You learned bit by bit, and then you became a more complete driver. And remember, that's just complete, not to kill people on the road. You're not Lewis Hamilton, unless for some reason Lewis Hamilton's on here. So think about the training in the same way. You have to piece it all together to become competent at absorbing and delivering in terms of what we do, which is what our PhD does, and then we stop. And then you move on from there, and then you need to develop in a sense where if you want to be the Lewis Hamilton, or even if you want to be that weekend racer, putting all your money into something, then you still need to go through this process, have it episodically, and try and improve each time. And that's maybe the challenge that's sometimes missing from teachers. And maybe it's a time constraint, maybe it's a budget constraint, maybe there's more to it than that. But let's just go with ideals, because that's where we're going for. And I think one of the key things that we do is we won't get every single thing where we want it to be, but training, if we get training right, it makes everything else easier. And especially when it comes to disaggregating, saving time and saving money for schools in that way. So talk to the last part now, and that is thinking about staff satisfaction in general. Now, with the staff satisfaction, one of the key things is try not to get the staff to think about just placing my body in a room constitutes its training. So think about how you can step away from body there, focus. Obviously, that's a terrible sentence. I'm quite ashamed that I've typed it, but I hope it rings true. If your training is simply body there, training is like all you know for your training session is that someone signed a piece of paper, or that 42 people were in attendance. You have no idea what they were taking from it, which is why I stop and actually ask what you guys think, because I want to know. And obviously, I'm going to want to know again in a minute. With following the benefit-led training, everyone knows where they're going. You end up with clearer benefit. By disaggregating it away from people, putting things into video, into audio, into things that actually comes to them. Because remember, even when you say, well, Leon, why would I bother making a video and recording myself when, what if I just typed out all this stuff for them? Well, first of all, taking the video for a 5-minute training will take you 5.5 minutes. Say you did it twice because you got something really wrong. 10 minutes. People will take you going, it doesn't have to be perfect. But if you write that long training out, that's going to take you 2 hours. So what do you want to do? Right? And then when you give it to them, remember in a video is all I have to do is press play, and then I'm passive. I can listen in my car. I can listen while I'm doing the gardening. I can watch while I'm having a microwave meal. I can blah, 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 blah. And we've done this loads. And that's why you get to people in their own time. If you give them people something to read, they have to actively engage with the whole screen, the whole page. I'm not against reading in any way. Obviously, it's one of the most beautiful things. But I would rather read things that are really, really inspiring and beautiful, or made for me to be inspired or to be taken in. I don't think behavior policy change is going to be the item. And also, if you've got someone in your school, we're all, at the end of the day, teachers, we're all presenters of a nature. Do you know what I mean? We're supposed to be good at getting that information across. So allow it to come in video. You can put it in their own time. And then what happens also when it's there in your own time, like I was talking about with Michelle earlier, you have the 3 different items. You have a system that allows it to be personalized on different levels. What's really, really important is never, ever underestimate the ability of the person or the people who are trusted in your school. In all the schools I worked in, even if they didn't want to do it, and I was the head teacher in those schools, I would strongly invite, is that another way of saying but I would strongly invite certain staff just to introduce a 1-minute thing before training, before I came on. Because when I came on, especially when I was a head teacher, I was like, well, this must be important. But when I actually used to get other staff to share the best practice, you actually see there's people that are liked in schools, there's people that have their ideas in schools, there's people that don't normally use their voice in schools. And I think sharing some of those people from who's liked and that personalization, hey, I'm not learning from Mr. X on that website, or I'm not learning from celebrity so-and-so, I'm learning from Paul. Oh, hey, it's great to see what Jim's doing in his lesson. Oh, it's great to see what Sanjay's doing over there. It's really, really important when it becomes personalized, not only to you in terms of the training you're taking, but personalized that it's coming from the people that you like and respect. And that becomes a different issue when you get to the synthesize and the rest of it. So I hope we've given a lot of ideas there with benefit-led training. And the last point I'll touch on here is staff ease. And that's something I've kind of gone into a little earlier, is capturing knowledge in practice. So I'll just skim over this. The idea of video observation. When you're capturing the evidence, the onus is on staff to provide, right? So don't say, I'm coming to you at this time that day. It's like, hey, capture 5 minutes that you like. Capture 5 minutes where you think they're empathy practice. Just show it to me. You've got 2 weeks to do it. At any point in the 2 weeks, find 5 minutes and send it to me. And if you choose that to be on Teams, you choose it to be on Classroom, if you choose to be on email, you choose to be on WhatsApp, or you choose to be on a system like ours, no problem. But the idea is capture it that way so you flip it. Instead of actually having like, hey, there's these 4 days of training and we're doing X, Y, Z, well, why not have 1 or 2 or 3 5-minute videos with a couple of tips in it each and just say, send me one back? How much easier is that, and how much more benefit led is that? I want to see it. And then in a month, I want to see a different one. And then you've got this other different communication thing. I'd also say as well here about video reflection and perfection. One of the other items I think is really, really important when you're trying to get the benefit is, a lot of people are kind of reluctant to do something because they want it to be perfect. I'm Mr. 7 out of 10, by the way. I don't mind hair, I don't mind beard, I don't mind when I mess up. But in that part there, I think what we see with NQTs a lot is they try to really push to be perfect in what they do. And so one of the things that we actually think, we find it is a natural thing. They want to be better. They want to push themselves forward in the best way. So when we ask them, I was like, hey, great lesson section that you shared. I just out of interest, how many did you share? Most people normally record themselves on average of 4 times. And I say, why? Were the others rubbish? They go, no. I just wanted to do it. I wanted to just. So don't forget that video reflection allows a natural space for that perfectionism or that drive for showing you something positive to capture. Because people also, at the end of the day, they want to show off. And that's happened in inner city schools, some top private schools, young teachers, old teachers. People want to show what they can do. And also, I think one of the clearest things I can say about when you capture that is you're allowing people to execute what they can do. They're not just in a situation where they are explaining. So it's allowed them to execute what they're doing in what they're doing as well. So I hope, again, that was useful. I really, really, really am grateful for you guys to do that. If you've liked anything I've said, then please feel free to book a one-to-one with me. And also, I tell this story to everyone. There is no charge. It was a surprise when people ask in booking a one-to-one. I like talking to you and about education as much as hopefully you like talking about education. Otherwise, you wouldn't be on a webinar on a Thursday evening when schools have got back. You must care about education and training. I don't know if anyone knows, but I'm supposed to be in China. We're not allowed back, actually. We're not allowed back, put it that way. And so we have offices here, we have offices in the Middle East, and we have offices in Cairo, and we have offices in China, and I can't go back to China. I'm supposed to be part of my China team, but I'm back now with my UK staff, which I'm really, really enjoying. So I have more time on my hands than I thought I would, and so I love doing the one-to-ones and helping people. And obviously, if you've ever been on one with me, I promise you it's you first, you centered, you this, and I really, really look forward to doing that. So that brings us to just over an hour. So please do share any key comments and takeaways. I am really interested. You will also be asked to, and I've set it up for myself, to rate to rate the presentation straight afterwards, to think, was this worth an hour? I should make the question, was this worth an hour of your life? You say 2 out of 5, but you will get ratings as well. That's just for me, because obviously I always like to kind of live by it by my staff. So I'm really interested in what you think in terms of ratings, but please do share any key comments and takeaways and thoughts, and I'll come back to these now. So I will come back to here. Sorry if I've gone away. Here we go. I've also had one of these. Yeah, thank you, Tanya. Really appreciate it. How do we ensure that everyone receives? I talked about that one. How do we support NQT staff members and our teachers from September? Brilliant, Mark. If you stay on the line, I'll show you that shortly. I'd be interested in answering. I hope it was useful, Susan. Katie Cass, really like. Yep. Oh, sorry, I've gone further back than I want to. I'm unable to access the link. Sorry about that. Thanks, that works. How do you know if the video has been watched? Oh, sorry, that's a private one. I'll answer that one in just a. Oh no, it is a question. It's not private. How do you know if the video has been watched? Make sure that even people have listened. Really great question. Now, in the way that we set things up for videos, if you do it on Google Teams, obviously it's not set up for that. But what we were saying, what we were doing, we were trying to make sure that you could track it, right? And actually, it was a university. I won't name the university, but it was a university who asked us, who use our stuff, who actually asked us to change slightly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a incognito tab, and I'm actually also going to remember to share this one real quickly just to answer that question. So I'm going to share my entire screen, and so here we have an incognito tab. Now, what I'm going to do with my incognito tab is I'm going to sign in as a mentor into our system. Why? Because I want to show you how stealthy we can be. So you say, how do we know someone watched something or did something? Now, the first part of that I should show you is if you have a video with us, let's say you're on the AET, and these are the old ones where I was so much younger than today. So forgive me, all these are now animations, but this is one of our first systems and they will be on it. So here I am in it. So answering the question, said, how do I know people watched it? Well, here we are, obviously back in lockdown when we used to have haircuts. You used to watch a video and then you go to what we call assessment mode. And in assessment mode, you'll see that these 2 orange dots pop up. And so the way that we would know whether people were watching and interacting is we get them assessed in the video. So that was point 1. That was something that we learned. When we actually put quizzes and items at the end of videos, it was very, very problematic. The uptake was low. What we found was you're in a situation where they could answer in the video. So they're watching and they answer. And that makes it much easier for them. It increases engagement. Another thing was they're also able to see other students' comments around the same thing. Again, other teacher-learner, again, increasing engagement. Now, more stalkerish, if you want to go into that term, if I sign into the same thing here now as a mentor, just to give you an idea of what we can go in and see. So here I get a standard, I get a tracker who's been in, who's been this. So I'm going to go to this student here, Mia, because I know she goes in a lot. If I go into Mia and I go into her watch history, I can see every single part of a video that she's watched. And when I go into it, you see I've just been flicking in and out of videos. If you want to know exactly how much they've watched, not only does it tell you exactly when they watched it, but it shows you how much of the video they've covered in watching it. And because I just touch on videos and I don't watch them in full, I have you see, I can show you how that grey bar represents the whole video, and that shows you how much I've watched. And it tells you every single time I've come back to the video. But because of the nature of how I use videos, I'm just kind of going to the question when I'm doing a demo. That's what happens. But that's what I can see. And we built that, as I say, for a university. They wanted to see exactly how much of a video was watched. So I hope that kind of answers that question on that one. So going back to the questions, hope that was useful, Anna. And that's how we make sure. Massive emphasis in our school, especially in September, we need to make someone feel safe, but give them everything to complete their job. Yeah, and you don't need to get them all in a room to do it, Mark. Michelle, you're very welcome. Thank you so much. Really, really happy that it was useful to you. Really, really glad that you came. Anna, thank you so much. No, thank you. Really, really appreciate you coming with us and helping. Thank you very much. Tanya, yeah, really, really great to have you with us again. Thank you so much for spending your time. May Reed, I hope I pronounced that right. Please forgive if not. Some really positive insights. Really hope it was useful to you. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Paul, yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate your blessings. It's really, really kind of you. Really useful ideas, especially getting staff to ask for training in their own time and what it is and what's in it for me. Yeah. Because we don't like things done to us. Like if my wife walks in now and says to me, I don't know, if she says to me, can you help me with something? I'll be like, well, yeah, of course I can help you take out the rubbish or do this or make the dinner. But if she comes in and goes, well, haven't you made dinner yet? But you take the point. If she asks me to be part of it, I'm like, yeah, great, I'm in. But if she comes in and says it's being done to you, then it's due. So that's why I think it works. It's human at the end of the day. And Blair, if you can share the file, the webinar presentation from this, I'd be very, very grateful. Eileen, brilliant. Thank you very, very much. Really, really appreciate it as well. Thank you very much. Thank you to you two for joining us. And yes, I have two questions around the same item actually. Sorry, hopefully it wasn't mine, about technical difficulties about having this webinar and not being able to tap into all of it. So I will share this webinar afterwards. I will ask the team to share the webinar with colleagues so you see it. And I'm really, really glad that you're all here. If there are any more questions or comments or anything that you want to say, please just note them now before I disappear. Not to get a haircut, by the way. I'm starting to get quite proud of this nearly foot-long thing that's sitting on my head. So yeah, it's really, really good. Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. I will send out that. Thank you, Katie. Thanks. Good times for communication and technology. I think people are more. Yes. And I'd say for one of the things, Katie, I always have to turn up into people's houses. And I always have to turn up into people's houses. Well, that sounds strange. Sorry, I have to turn up into people's schools or buildings, and I have to kind of convince them. And you realise how much of a charade that we have around us all the time, Katie. So it might be a situation where, like, I'm wearing the suit and I've got the watch and I've driven up in this car and you've got the big desk and you know how many times I've gone in somewhere and someone's just gone, just tell them to hold my call. I'm like, you didn't get a call. You're just trying to sound important. One of the things about Zoom is we're meeting on a much simpler level. I'm just a guy who wants to help teachers from a load of teachers who want to help their teaching students, and all the pretense and the faff and the bubble and what was the entrance to our school like and all that kind of stuff. It's all gone. And that's the beautiful thing. That's the beautiful thing about Zoom and connecting this way, because I think it gives the best of both worlds, where we are happy for us to be seen, happy for us to be connected, but we also not come with any pretense. There's no showing off, because you have to think so many things that we build around us in our offices or even the way we dress, they're artifacts about how we wish to be seen. And basically sometimes it's our artifacts just clashing and combining with each other rather than being in a situation where we actually just talk about the issues at hand. And that's actually one of the other things about face-to-face training as well, is sometimes people are bringing it in, and you know the people who are sometimes difficult or really, really super keen in the training days, that's just the role they play. I used to say to myself, why'd you do that? Why'd you come in late? You know what time it starts. Why are you coming in late? And I don't know. That's just who I became. That's just who I became for training. But when you then turn around and you say, right, all your training's video now, they watch all of them. And that's another thing about training. And sorry to keep going on, colleagues, but I think this is really, really important. One of the things is just when you have a video repository that people know and trust, people use it. And you think about that just in terms of your own knowledge, in terms of how you use Netflix now, or how you use YouTube now, or if you do Vimeo now, it's just, that's where we get our information. It's so much easier to just tap into that and watch it. And YouTube knows. So when you type in how to fill a maxi point boiler, it doesn't even just give you the video anymore. It gives you the part in the video that highlights that section. So it'd be like 2 minutes 14 to 3 minutes 7, because they know that's what people want. And that's what we need to do with our training effectively in schools, is just allow people to get what they want and jump into it. Maybe not that's a bit dramatic, but you know where it is. Thank you very, very much again for joining me. Thank you, Gertrude, really appreciate it. Thank you, Nita, for touching base as well. I really, really appreciate that. And really, 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 really glad. Thank you very much. Have a lovely evening. And I will hopefully see some of you one-to-ones.